They tied the rope around his ankles and dragged him behind a horse through the main street of Crowley's Crossing. His body bounced off rocks and ruts, leaving a trail of blood in the dust. The townspeople watched from their windows, too afraid to help, too ashamed to look away. He was a Union veteran, a black man who had dared to buy land, a threat to everything the Hollis family had built on hatred and fear. When they finally stopped, Marcus lay broken in the dirt, barely breathing, waiting for the bullet that would end his suffering. It never came. Instead, the Hollis brothers left him there as a warning to anyone else who might forget their place. What they didn't know was that someone was watching from the shadows. Someone who had seen this kind of evil before. Someone who would rise before sunrise and deliver a reckoning that Crowley's Crossing would never forget. The town had been named after Josiah Crowley, a fur trapper who had established a trading post at the crossroads of two rivers in 1832. For 20 years, it was nothing more than a waypoint, a place where travelers stopped to rest, resupply, and move on to somewhere better. Then gold was discovered in the hills to the north. And suddenly, Crowley's Crossing mattered. By 1865, when the war ended and the nation began its long, painful reconstruction, the town had grown to nearly 2,000 souls. There were banks and hotels, saloons and churches, a sheriff's office and a courthouse. There were families raising children, merchants building businesses, dreams taking root in the Colorado soil. But beneath the surface of progress, something ugly festered. The Hollis family had arrived in Crowley's Crossing in 1858. Three brothers from Georgia who had made their fortune in the slave trade before the war made that business untenable. They had seen the writing on the wall earlier than most, liquidating their human property and converting it to gold, which they carried west in a wagon train guarded by a dozen armed men. By the time the war ended, the Hollis brothers owned half of Crowley's Crossing: the bank, the largest saloon, 3 of the 5 hotels, the general store, and most importantly, the sheriff, a man named Cobb, who owed his position to Hollis money and kept it by doing whatever the brothers asked. The oldest brother was Cornelius, 52 years old, silver-haired and silver-tongued, with the manners of a gentleman and the soul of a rattlesnake. He handled the family's legitimate businesses, sat on the town council, donated to the church, and maintained the illusion of respectability that the other brothers couldn't be bothered with. The middle brother was Bartholomew, 48, built like a bull, with hands that had choked the life out of more men than he could remember. He handled the family's illegitimate businesses, the brothels, the opium dens, the protection rackets that bled the town's smaller merchants dry. The youngest brother was Samuel, 44, lean and quick and cruel, with a reputation for violence that made even his brothers uncomfortable. Samuel was the one who handled problems, who made examples, who reminded people what happened to those who crossed the Hollis family. Together, the 3 brothers had transformed Crowley's Crossing into their personal kingdom. The law belonged to them. The economy belonged to them. The people, whether they admitted it or not, belonged to them too. And for 15 years after the war, no one had seriously challenged their dominion. Then Marcus Washington arrived. Marcus was 34 years old, born a slave in Virginia, freed by the war that had taken so much from so many. He had fought with the Union Army, serving in one of the colored regiments that had proven through blood and sacrifice that black men could be soldiers just as brave and capable as any others. He had survived battles that killed half his company. He had earned a sergeant's stripes and a collection of scars that told the story of 100 close calls. When the war ended, Marcus had done what so many freedmen dreamed of. He had gone west. He had worked cattle drives and railroad crews, saving every penny, learning every skill, waiting for the opportunity that he knew would come if he was patient enough. The opportunity came in the form of a dying homesteader outside Crowley's Crossing, an old man named Patterson who had built a small ranch on 60 acres of good land, but had no family to leave it to. Marcus had found him on the road, thrown from his horse, leg shattered, fever already setting in. He had carried the old man home, cared for him through his final weeks, and listened to stories of a life that had been harder than it looked. On his deathbed, Patterson had made a decision. He had signed over the deed to his land, legally, properly, with witnesses and a notary, to Marcus Washington. A black man now owned property in Crowley's Crossing. Good property. Land with water rights and grazing pastures and a house that needed work but could become something real. The Hollis brothers heard about the sale within hours. They sent a delegation first. Cornelius himself, all smiles and reason, offering to buy the land for a fair price. Marcus declined. They sent a second offer, higher this time. Marcus declined again. They sent a third offer, accompanied by a subtle threat. Wouldn't it be safer for Marcus to take the money and move somewhere more welcoming? Marcus still declined. He had spent his entire life being told where he could go, what he could do, who he could be. He had fought a war for the right to make his own choices. He was not going to surrender that right now. Not to 3 former slavers who thought their money could buy anything, including his dignity. The Hollis brothers were not accustomed to being refused. They came for him on a Saturday night. Marcus was in the barn, checking on his horses, when he heard the hoofbeats. 12 riders, maybe more, carrying torches that turned the darkness into a hellscape of dancing shadows. He reached for his rifle, but they were already through the door, surrounding him, too many to fight. Samuel Hollis led the group, his face twisted into a grin that held no humanity. "You should have taken the money, boy," Samuel said. "Now you're going to learn what happens to your kind when they forget their place." They beat him first, fists and boots and rifle butts, raining down blows until Marcus couldn't stand, couldn't see, couldn't do anything but curl into a ball and try to survive. They broke his ribs, his nose, his left arm. They cut him with knives, shallow slashes meant to hurt rather than kill. They laughed while they did it, enjoying their work, taking their time. Then they tied a rope around his ankles and attached it to Samuel's horse. The ride into town took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of being dragged through dirt and rocks and broken glass, his body bouncing and scraping, his flesh tearing, his consciousness fading in and out as the pain became too great to process. They stopped in the main street of Crowley's Crossing, in front of the saloon where half the town had gathered to watch. It was nearly midnight, but word had spread quickly. The Hollis brothers were making an example, and everyone knew better than to miss it. Samuel dismounted and stood over Marcus's broken body. "Look at him," he announced to the crowd. "This is what happens to anyone who thinks they're better than us. This is what happens to anyone who forgets who runs this town." He kicked Marcus in the ribs, hard enough to make him cry out. A weak, broken sound that made some of the watchers flinch. "Anyone else want to buy land without our permission? Anyone else want to pretend they're equal to white Christian folk? Samuel looked around, making eye contact with as many people as he dared meet his gaze. This is your warning. Remember it. He left Marcus in the dirt and walked into the saloon, his brothers and their men following. The celebration of their victory would last until dawn. The townspeople dispersed slowly, reluctantly, guilty in their silence, but too afraid to be anything else. Within an hour, the street was empty except for a broken man lying in his own blood, barely alive, waiting for death to claim him. Death didn't come, but someone else did. The stranger had arrived in Crowley's Crossing 3 days earlier, though no one had paid much attention to him. He was unremarkable in the way of drifters, dusty clothes, tired horse, the lean look of a man who had been on the road too long. He had rented a room at the smallest hotel, the one the Hollis brothers didn't own, and had spent his days watching the town without appearing to watch it. He had learned things in those 3 days, learned about the Hollis brothers and their grip on the town, learned about the sheriff who was no sheriff at all, learned about Marcus Washington and the land he had legally purchased and the punishment that was coming for him. He had considered leaving. This wasn't his fight. This wasn't his town. He had enough ghosts following him without adding more. But then he had watched from the shadows as they dragged Marcus through the streets. He had heard the laughter, seen the blood, felt the weight of an entire town's cowardice pressing down on him like a physical force. And he had made a decision. He waited until the last watcher had gone home, until the saloon's windows glowed with lantern light and the sounds of celebration echoed through the empty streets. Then he moved, silent as a shadow, to where Marcus lay. The man was alive. Barely. His breathing was shallow and irregular, his pulse weak and thready. The wounds were severe, lacerations covering most of his body, broken bones, probably internal bleeding. Without help, he would be dead by morning. The stranger lifted him carefully, cradling the broken body against his chest, and carried him through the darkness to the hotel where he was staying. The owner, a woman named Ruth, who had reason to hate the Hollis brothers herself, asked no questions. She simply cleared a bed, brought hot water and bandages, and helped however she could. They worked through the night, cleaning wounds, setting bones, stitching flesh. The stranger knew more about field medicine than any doctor, knowledge purchased in blood during a war that seemed like a lifetime ago. He did everything he could, which might not be enough, and then he sat beside the bed and waited for the dawn. Marcus opened his eyes just before sunrise. The first thing he saw was an unfamiliar face, weathered, scarred, with eyes that held a depth of pain he recognized. A survivor's eyes, a soldier's eyes. Who? Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, his throat raw from screaming. Nobody important, the stranger said. Just someone who was in the right place at the wrong time. Or maybe the wrong place at the right time. I've never been sure how that saying goes. Why? Why did I help you? The stranger shrugged. Because someone should have. Because what they did to you was evil, and evil shouldn't go unanswered. Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing, and I'm tired of seeing it. Marcus tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back, gasping in pain. Don't move. You've got more broken pieces than whole ones right now. It's going to take time. Time? Marcus laughed bitterly, and even that small movement made him wince. The Hollis brothers won't give me time. When they find out I'm alive, they'll finish what they started. They won't find out. Not yet. The stranger stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the town that was just beginning to stir in the early light. And when they do, it will be too late. Too late for what? The stranger was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of a man describing weather or mathematics rather than violence. I'm going to kill them. All 3 brothers. And anyone else who helped do this to you. Marcus stared at him. You're one man. They have dozens. I've faced worse odds. You don't know what they're capable of. I know exactly what they're capable of. I watched them drag you through the streets like a dog. The stranger turned from the window, and his eyes had changed. Colder now, harder, reflecting something that Marcus recognized from his own experience. The look of a man who had made peace with death. I've spent the last 10 years trying to outrun my past, trying to be someone other than what the war made me, trying to believe that violence doesn't solve anything. He shook his head. But some people don't understand anything except violence. Some evil is so deep that it can't be reasoned with, can't be reformed, can only be cut out like a cancer. The Hollis brothers are that kind of evil. And this town will never be free until they're gone. They'll kill you. Marcus said, one against many. You won't survive. Maybe not. The stranger picked up his gun belt from the chair where he had laid it and began strapping it on. But I'll take as many of them with me as I can. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to give this town a chance to become something better. He finished adjusting the belt and checked his revolver, an old Colt that had seen better days, but was maintained with obvious care. Rest now. Ruth will take care of you. When this is over, one way or another, I'll come back. Wait. Marcus reached out, grabbing the stranger's arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong given his condition. Your name. If you're going to die for me, I should at least know your name. The stranger paused, looked at Marcus's hand on his arm, looked at the man himself, broken but unbowed, still fighting even when he couldn't stand. Elijah, he said finally. Elijah Kane. Elijah Kane. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll remember that name. I'll make sure others do too. Don't make me a legend. I'm just a man doing what needs to be done. Elijah gently removed Marcus's hand and headed for the door. And right now, what needs to be done is waiting for me in that saloon. He walked out into the dawn. The Hollis brothers were not early risers on Sunday mornings. After a night of celebrating their victory over Marcus Washington, they had drunk themselves into a stupor and were now sleeping it off in the rooms above the saloon they owned. Their men, those who hadn't gone home to their own beds, were scattered throughout the building, snoring on tables and floors, and wherever else unconsciousness had claimed them. Sheriff Cobb was the only one awake, sitting at a table near the door, nursing a cup of coffee and a guilty conscience that he had long ago learned to ignore. He saw the stranger enter and thought nothing of it at first. Just another drifter looking for a morning drink. Then he noticed the way the man moved, the way his eyes swept the room, cataloging positions and threats, the way his hand rested near his holster with the casual readiness of someone who had drawn and fired more times than he could count. Saloons closed, Cobb said, standing up slowly. Come back later. I'm not here for a drink. The stranger's voice was quiet, but it carried in the empty room. I'm here for the Hollis brothers. Cobb's hand moved toward his gun. He was fast, faster than most, but he wasn't fast enough. The stranger's Colt was out and leveled before Cobb's fingers touched the grip. "Don't," the stranger said. "You're not who I came for, but I'll kill you if I have to." Cobb froze. His eyes darted to the stairs where the brothers were sleeping, to the men passed out around the room, back to the stranger. "You're one man," Cobb said. "You can't possibly." "I can. I will. The only question is how many people have to die before the brothers do." The stranger gestured with his gun. "Take off your badge, set it on the table, and walk out that door. Find somewhere to be for the next hour. When you come back, either I'll be dead or the Hollis brothers will. Either way, your choice will have been made." Cobb hesitated. He thought about his loyalty to the brothers, the money they paid him, the power they let him share. He thought about his wife and children who would suffer if he died in this saloon fighting for men who had never cared whether he lived or died. He unpinned his badge, set it on the table, and walked out the door without looking back. The stranger picked up the badge and looked at it for a moment. Then he dropped it in his pocket and started up the stairs. The first man he encountered was a guard stationed at the top of the staircase, a large man with a shotgun who was supposed to be watching for trouble but had fallen asleep in his chair. Elijah hit him once, hard at the base of the skull, and caught the shotgun before it could clatter to the floor. The man slumped unconscious, and Elijah moved on. The hallway at the top of the stairs had 4 doors. He knew from his days of watching that the brothers occupied 3 of them, with the 4th being a storage room. He also knew that each brother would have at least 1 guard in the room with him, men paid to protect them even in sleep. He chose Samuel's room first. The youngest Hollis brother was the most dangerous, the one most likely to react with immediate violence. Better to eliminate him before he could become a threat. Elijah tried the door. Unlocked. He pushed it open slowly, silently, and slipped inside. Samuel was asleep in a large bed, sprawled across silk sheets that were stained with whiskey and other substances Elijah didn't want to identify. A woman lay beside him, a prostitute probably, hired for the night, and a guard sat in a chair by the window, head lolled back, snoring. Elijah crossed to the guard first, pressing the barrel of his gun against the man's temple until he woke. "Quiet," Elijah whispered. "Get up. Walk out. Don't come back." The guard's eyes went wide with fear. He looked at Samuel, still sleeping, then at Elijah, then at the gun pressed against his head. He made his choice quickly, rising from the chair and slipping out the door without a word. The woman was next. Elijah touched her shoulder, and she woke with a start, mouth opening to scream. "Don't." His voice was calm, reassuring. "I'm not going to hurt you. I need you to leave. Quietly. Go somewhere safe and don't come back until noon." She looked at him, looked at Samuel, and nodded frantically. She gathered her clothes and fled, not even bothering to dress until she was in the hallway. Now it was just Elijah and Samuel Hollis. He stood over the bed, looking down at the man who had laughed while dragging Marcus through the streets. The man who had kicked a broken body and called it justice. The man who had spent his entire life causing pain because he enjoyed it. "Wake up." Samuel's eyes snapped open. He saw Elijah, saw the gun, and his hand immediately went for the pistol under his pillow. Elijah shot him through the hand before it reached its target. Samuel screamed. a high, shock sound that echoed through the building. He clutched his ruined hand to his chest, blood pouring between his fingers, staring at Elijah with an expression of disbelief. "That was for Marcus Washington," Elijah said, "the man you dragged through the streets last night." "You? Who are you? I'll kill you." "No, you won't." Elijah shot him again, this time through the knee. Samuel's scream became something inhuman, a sound of pure animal agony. "That was for everyone else you've hurt, everyone you've killed, everyone whose life you've destroyed because you thought you had the right." He heard footsteps in the hallway now, shouting, the other brothers waking, their men scrambling to respond. He didn't have much time. He leaned close to Samuel's ear. "You're going to bleed out in about 10 minutes, maybe faster. You can spend that time in pain, or you can tell me where your brothers are and I'll end it quick. Your choice." "Go to hell," Samuel spat. "Already been there." Elijah straightened up. "Enjoy the trip yourself." He left Samuel writhing on the bed and moved back into the hallway. Bartholomew was already coming out of his room, half-dressed, a gun in his hand. He saw Elijah and fired without aiming, a wild shot that went wide and buried itself in the wall. Elijah didn't miss. 2 shots, center mass. Bartholomew went down hard, his bulk hitting the floor with a sound like a sack of grain. He twitched once, twice, and was still. Men were coming up the stairs now, drawn by the gunfire. 3 of them, weapons ready, charging into a situation they didn't understand. Elijah dropped to one knee, making himself a smaller target, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. 3 men fell. 1 dead, 2 wounded. The survivors scrambled back down the stairs, deciding that whatever the Hollis brothers paid them wasn't worth dying for. That left Cornelius. The oldest brother was the smartest, which meant he would be the most dangerous. He wouldn't charge blindly into gunfire. He would wait, think, look for an advantage. Elijah moved to Cornelius's door and found it locked. He stepped back and kicked it open, diving to the side as a shotgun blast tore through the space where his chest had been. "I know who you are." Cornelius's voice came from inside the room. "You're the drifter who's been watching the town. Did that darky send you? Did he pay you to—" "Nobody sent me," Elijah said, pressing himself against the wall beside the door. "Nobody paid me. I'm just a man who doesn't like watching evil go unpunished." "Evil?" Cornelius laughed. "I'm a businessman. Everything I've done has been legal. I've never broken a law in my life. You've broken something more important than laws. You've broken people. You've broken this town. And tonight, you broke a man who survived a war, who earned his freedom, who had the courage to build something for himself despite everything you and your kind did to stop him. He's a man." Elijah's voice rose for the first time, cracking with an anger he usually kept buried. "A man worth more than you'll ever be. A man who fought for something other than money and power. A man who came west looking for a chance to live and found you instead." He took a breath, steadied himself. "Your brothers are dead or dying. Your men are running. Your sheriff walked away. It's just you and me now, Cornelius. You can come out and face me, or you can sit in that room and wait for me to come in. Either way, this ends the same." Silence. Then, slowly, the door opened. Cornelius Hollis stepped out, his shotgun lowered, his hands raised. He was dressed in a silk robe, his silver hair disheveled, his face pale but composed. He looked at Elijah with eyes that held no fear, only calculation. "You're going to kill me anyway," Cornelius said. "So tell me something first. Why? Why risk your life for a man you don't know? What possible benefit could—" "There is no benefit," Elijah interrupted. "There is no reward. There's just right and wrong. And what you did to Marcus Washington was wrong. What you've done to this town for 15 years was wrong, and someone had to stop it." Cornelius shook his head slowly. "You're a fool, a sentimental fool. Men like me built this country, men who understood that power is the only thing that matters. You can kill me, but another will take my place. There will always be another. Maybe, but not today, and not you." Elijah raised his gun. "Any last words?" Cornelius smiled, a thin, cold smile that held no warmth. "I'll see you in hell." "Probably." The gunshot echoed through the saloon and out into the street, where a crowd had begun to gather. The townspeople of Crowley's Crossing, drawn by the sounds of violence, were watching the saloon with expressions that mixed fear with something that might have been hope. When Elijah walked out at the front door, alone and upright, a murmur ran through the crowd. He was covered in gunpowder residue and other men's blood. His face was set in an expression that discouraged questions. He walked to the sheriff's office, where Cobb had retreated to wait out the violence. He found the sheriff sitting at his desk, staring at the wall, looking like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse. Elijah dropped the badge he had taken earlier on the desk. "The Hollis brothers are dead," he said. "So are most of their men. The others ran. This town needs a new sheriff, a real one, someone who enforces the law instead of whoever pays the most." Cobb looked at the badge, then at Elijah. "And if I don't want to be that sheriff, then find someone who does. But either way, the Hollis era is over. Crowley's Crossing belongs to its people now. What they do with it is up to them." He turned and walked back out into the morning light. The crowd parted for him, silent, watching. Some of them were already crying. Whether from relief or fear or some combination of both, he couldn't tell. Some of them were smiling. Some of them looked like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. He didn't stop, didn't speak. He just walked back to the hotel where Marcus was recovering, where Ruth was waiting with questions she knew better than to ask. "It's done," he told her. "The brothers are dead. The town is free." Ruth nodded slowly. "And Marcus?" "He'll live. I'll stay until he's strong enough to take care of himself. Then I'll move on." "Where will you go?" Elijah looked out the window at the town that was already beginning to transform. People emerging from their homes, talking to each other, processing what had happened and what it meant. Somewhere else. There's always somewhere else. Marcus's recovery took 3 weeks. Elijah stayed for all of it, helping where he could, watching as the town slowly rebuilt itself. A new sheriff was elected. A former deputy named Henderson, who had secretly hated the Hollis brothers but had been too afraid to act. A town council was formed, this time with real elections and real representation. The businesses the brothers had owned were sold or distributed, their profits going to the people who had been exploited for so long. Marcus's land was protected by the new sheriff and the new council. No one challenged his ownership again. No one dragged him through the streets. He began to rebuild his ranch, slowly, painfully, with help from neighbors who had been too afraid to help before. On the morning Elijah left, Marcus was waiting for him in front of the hotel. You don't have to go, Marcus said. This town could use a man like you. You could build something here. I'm not a builder. Elijah mounted his horse and looked down at the man whose life he had saved. I'm just someone who tears down what needs tearing. The building is up to people like you. Will you ever stop? Ever settle somewhere? Elijah was quiet for a moment. His eyes were distant, focused on something Marcus couldn't see. Maybe. When I've paid off what I owe. What do you owe? More than I can ever repay. Elijah gathered his reins. Take care of yourself, Marcus Washington. Build something beautiful on that land. Raise a family. Live the life that men like the Hollis brothers tried to take from you. And what about you? Elijah smiled, a rare expression that transformed his weathered face into something almost human. Don't worry about me. I've got more towns to visit, more brothers to kill. He touched the brim of his hat. Maybe I'll see you again someday. Maybe I won't. But either way, remember what happened here. Remember that one man can make a difference. Remember that evil doesn't win just because it's loud and violent and cruel. He turned his horse toward the rising sun. Sometimes, he said over his shoulder, good people just have to be louder. He rode out of Crowley's Crossing without looking back. Behind him, a town was being reborn. A man was being healed. A legend was being born. And somewhere ahead, more injustice waited to be answered. The gunslinger rose before sunrise and rode toward the horizon. There was always more work to be done. If you believe that justice is worth fighting for, leave a like. Which moment hit you hardest? When Marcus was dragged through the streets? When Elijah made his choice? Or when the town finally began to heal? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for more stories of courage, redemption, and the heroes who rise when others fall. Because sometimes the only thing evil needs